Oftentimes when you get accustomed to things, you lose perspective, especially about how you might have been before. What I mean by that is we often expect other people to be operating from the same internal guidance system as we are, even if and even when we have just made an evolution ourselves recently. It's almost like we become a different person because not a lot of people change. But what I do know is that the people who do change, because I am one of them, I'm basically unrecognizable from who I was growing up with my brothers and sisters and classmates, especially people from high school. They expect me to be the same as I was back then, and so they treat me that way. They haven't upgraded their operating system to how I am now. And it also happens internally. So the people who do change, like myself, for example, we continue to do it. And we do it so often that it's our standard operating procedure. And it's almost alien to us that other people don't. And also, sometimes our former selves are alien to us. Some people feel embarrassed about who they used to be. And that's a little bit of an indication. If you are a person who's changed, then you may have changed and upgraded in your life more than once. And so you understand that. And people often talk about that. But let's get into embarrassment, because it's one of these emotions where we're basically attacking ourselves, right? It's like an autoimmune disease, like multiple sclerosis, where the doctors have no idea what the exact cause is, and several other things, right? Where the body's attacking itself. It's like your own emotional, psycho-spiritual immune system is attacking itself. And the thing that really inspired this monologue here is oftentimes I kind of latch on to different speakers, and one of them is Seth Godin. And he was on a podcast just recently talking about being a solopreneur. And one thing that often comes up, because I continue to hear this, I was listening to Stephen Bartlett, the guy from Diary of a CEO, and just several other people who I've heard different things from them, over the past couple of days and weeks. And something they often talk about in building their businesses and doing things is they keep on talking about being afraid. And they talk about, I'm afraid because I'm afraid this, afraid that. And it's so alien to me, because as what I was saying earlier in the beginning was, when you are in a certain state of being, and when you're who you are, and when you have certain skills, talents, abilities, and just simply a perspective that is uniquely your own, you expect other people in the world unfairly, right, and unreasonably, irrationally even, to think as you do. And it's the way why we're so tribal, and why there's, all of this, conflict between, in religion and politics and sports teams and all this things like that. We label people as other than, and almost an enemy, if not at least an opponent, but sometimes a combatant, when they don't think the way that we do. And it's in this way somewhat, and it's a flaw perhaps, but you can turn it into a superpower if you wish, as you can anything once you recognize it and become aware of it. And that's part of what I'm talking about now, but not the main point. But the main point is about how many people keep talking about how they're afraid. And it's because I can't relate to fear. It doesn't make sense to me how often people talk about being afraid. And I have spent many years studying fear, but specifically because there was a time when I was afraid. And I remember it was during my from being a child all the way up till about late middle school, early high school, and is when it really started to go away. And then finally, I can say for sure that around my senior year of high school and beyond, it really dissipated into something that is just like the memory of a movie that I watched some time ago. It feels departed, like a different part of me, like something got amputated, or like an old skin was shed off, or an old outfit even, or some old sneakers, something that you can take off and discard, that it was yours, you owned it, but it wasn't really a part of you. You find that it's something that can be discarded and does not have to be permanently attached to you. It's not like your brain that's in your head or your heart, even though with technology these days people can replace those. Well, at least your heart you can. People have artificial hearts. I don't know about the brain yet, but I suppose that we as humanity and different engineers and scientists are attempting to do that with artificial intelligence, and we have partial success with that with BCIs, or brain-computer interfaces. But it's about this fear that I have gotten to the point where when I hear people talking about it, I almost get annoyed by it. And these are people who are great thinkers and who have varying different kinds of success in different fields, and they have lots of adoring fans and people who follow them and learn from them, me being one of them, or else I wouldn't have been listening so intently and closely to the things that they're saying to hear them talking about fear. And and for them to keep on talking about, like Seth Godin was talking about, and I didn't even really get to finish listening to exactly what he was talking about, but I got the idea because so many people say similar things. And he was being humble. I don't know if it was a faux humility or whatever, because he seems to be mostly genuine from what I can tell. I don't really know. I don't know a lot about a lot of people that I follow, and I'm really wary these days because of how many people are being outed as complete monsters and fraudsters and tricksters. So, I just do what Bruce Lee taught, which is take what works for you and discard the rest. So I'm just, there's a lot of people that I talk about, and not all of them I really have a good parasocial relationship with them, meaning I'm not really on friendly terms with them. I just listen because I'm listening the same way that I listen to or consume any kind of media at all. I'm looking on how I can, level up myself. And that's really why I consume anything at all, is how can I have this help me to be better so that I can overflow, and just by me being better in the world will get better. That's the logic I use. The logic I use is that I don't even really have to, as long as I'm getting better, the world will be better, and I'm doing the world a service by not being a freaking mess. So the less that I take away from the world, the better for the world, right? You can be neutral, you can be a liability, or you can be an asset, and I'm doing my best to be an asset to planet Earth as much as I possibly can. And although I don't know if that always works, or if I am at all, or if I'm completely delusional, but it doesn't matter, because for right now I don't know if I'm delusional or not, and so I'm going to continue to proceed as I am. And so moving along with this, the idea of fear, just like what Seth Godin was talking about, how he was mentioning something about, I don't know, I write a blog and I do it just because it's Monday, not because it's the best piece of work that I put out there, but because it's Monday and because I'm committed to doing it. And it may not be the best thing that I do, but the question was asked, what do you do about this, that, and he said something like, I'm afraid, and I'm afraid if it's not going to be received well, or if it's this and that. And I'm like, yeah, still to this day, I'm like afraid of, like, how are you still retaining fear about anything that you've been doing for so, like, where does that come from? So what are you talking about? I just always wonder what people are talking about being afraid, like, and the context that what they're talking about being afraid has to do with what other people think. Like, you're afraid, I'm afraid of letting people down, I'm afraid of, like, what the fuck? I don't get that. It seems so weird to me for people to be talking about being afraid of...
Camera ahead.
about being afraid of what other people may think, say, do, or how they're going to let somebody down. When, like, if you're doing something that, and I'm going to use this word, that's righteous, meaning that you have really good intentions and you've thought it through and you know what you're talking about, and you know you did all your checks and balances and you know made sure that you did your best to create the great thing, or you're just doing your best and you're not having oversight, and you've checked with other people maybe, and you know you've been doing it for a while, you're not getting lazy. Like, what are you fucking afraid of? I don't understand what people are taught. Like, that's why I made that comment earlier that I wonder if it's like faux or fake humility when people say that, like they're trying to be like humble to like be relatable or something like that. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but it just seems fucking weird to me. And I know I just cussed. I said fuck something 3 times because it's just creepy to me in a way. When people are talking about being afraid of stuff, especially when it has to do with the opinions and the words and the actions of other people. I mean, it's not like you're saying you're afraid of a volcanic eruption or an earthquake or a hurricane, which also are things not to be afraid of, because death is not a thing to be afraid of. Neither is pain, discomfort, ostracization, excommunication, embarrassment. None of that. And as I was going to mention earlier, I even developed an entire new field of study within the field called thanatology, which is the study of death and dying, called athanatophobology. Athanatophobology. A meaning not, thanatos from the Greek god of death, phobos, fear, and ology, to study. So I call my athanatophobology how the study of why and how to not fear death and dying. I'll extend it to that. The study of why and how to not fear death and dying. And it includes all the stuff that comes with death and dying. All the regret, the guilt, the pain, the discomfort, all that stuff that comes when people talk about their life flashing before their eyes, all of that. There's nothing to be afraid of. Now, I'm not going to get into all of that necessarily right now, but there's nothing to be afraid. The unknown is what people are afraid of, and there's all kinds of unknowns that people can be afraid of. A few of which are, they don't know what's going to happen after they die. Like, people often say, "Where am I going to go?" Right, and they're really thinking about what is going to happen to them. Is there going to be, paradise or punishment? Is it heaven? Is it hell? Is it angels or demons? Is it God? Is it the devil? Is it pain or is it pleasure? Is really what it comes down to. Because people are afraid of the unknown because they do not know whether they're going to go to some place that is really uncomfortable or really feels good or is somewhere in the middle or is nothing at all. And that's what people are afraid of ultimately. And it's weird to me. I don't have that perspective anymore. Because I've shed that old skin of being afraid, because I realize that there's absolutely nothing to be afraid of. But that's because I've adopted a very radical, self-reinforcing, closed loop of internal sovereignty that begins with an examination of our consciousness and the fundamental nature of reality, which is eternal. And the eternal nature of reality has nothing to do with a creator being. You can verify this by looking at the conservation laws from the first law of thermodynamics. Energy is not created or destroyed. And from the conservation of matter, matter is not created or destroyed, because neither energy or matter are created or destroyed. They simply change form. And changing form and not being created or destroyed means that they always were there, they are here now, and they always will be, which is synonymous with eternal. So science tells us that matter and energy, which our universe is composed of and exist within space and time, are eternal. And since they both have the same qualities, matter and energy must be the same. And Einstein's equation tells us that E, energy, equals M, mass, which is a measurement of matter, a certain measure of matter, times the speed of light, C, times itself, C squared. E equals mc squared. So we know that energy and matter have the same qualities of not being created or destroyed and only changing form, and that they're equal to each other, being interconvertible. You can change energy to matter and matter to energy. And then when you closely examine the attributes that are given to God, the most popular God, the God of Abraham, from Islam, Judaism, Christianity, that's supposed to be this being that has like Santa Claus powers, knows when you're sleeping, knows when you're awake, knows when you're bad or good, right? That's this omniscience. But where does omniscience come from, right? And why would we be afraid of that God, right? This is part of fear, because this God supposedly is omnipotent, has all power. But where does all power and all knowledge come from? Well, it comes from what I call omnifactor prime. See, these are all the omnifactors: omniscience, all-knowing; omnipotence, all-powerful. But they come from omnifactor prime, as I call it, which is omnipresence. Only by being everywhere at all times can you know everything and have power over everything at all times. But this immediately calls into question the existence of this creator God from the Abrahamic religions. Because this God, supposedly, and according to all the stories that we know about it, is an angry, whiny, tyrannical thing that gets mad when it tells its creations not to eat a certain fruit from a tree that gives them the knowledge of good and evil, but somehow didn't know that they were doing that, or knew that there was a talking snake that snuck into their garden and convinced them to do it. And so this being is definitely not omniscient. It doesn't know everything all the time. And therefore we know, because it wasn't in the garden, because the story says it returned to the garden, so it's not omnipresent, and it's not all-powerful, therefore. It can't be. If it can't be in all places at all times, it is not all-powerful and it is not all-knowing. Because omnipresence, which is the fundamental nature of reality, which is what gives reality the fundamental nature of reality being eternal, it gives it its eternality, right? That means that there cannot be an all-present being. What it means is that being itself is all-present. Not that there's an all-present being, that being itself is all-present, omnipresent. And so the fundamental nature of reality knows all and has power over all. We are existing within that. We are individual, finite, non-eternal perspectives within an eternal field, which is the fundamental nature of reality. And when you understand that, you'll understand that since that being, the most popular, powerful one that we know of, that we now know that it's from this logic and reason, that even physics tells us, well-established laws, that the fundamental nature of reality is eternal, but now we know that because of the attributes of this being that it is not eternal, we know that it cannot eternally punish us. And so that is something that we can know, and we can decide for ourselves that we know. And therefore that eliminates that one unknown, whether or not we're going to end up eternally punished or in eternal paradise. We can decide, we can take it a step further and be radical if we want to, and determine that it is we, ourselves, our individual and also co-eternal perspectives that decide what we're going to do, where we're going to go, how we're going to feel after we are disembodied, meaning die from this physical three-dimensional world that is limited by the space and time that is here. We can make that decision. We are not subject to anything, because this thing is not eternal, therefore cannot punish us eternally, and cannot grant us eternal pleasure either, because it is not itself eternal in the way that the very illogical stories tell us. It doesn't make any sense to begin with. We're all co-eternal. We were all here from the beginning. We are here now, and we will be here always. There is no end. What ends are these individualized stories in these different perspectives, in these different iterations of the eternal fundamental nature of reality. Your birth has always been, and so is your life, and so is your death. We're simply experiencing it in a very limited perspective, in a thin line. So in the same way, how, for example, if you were to take a roll of film, this is an example I learned from Brian Greene when I saw his special on PBS, in the Nova special called The Elegant Universe, which was named after his book, The Elegant Universe, which he published in 1998. 1998 or 1999. And he talks about if you take a roll of film, like the old film for people who don't know that, who are too young, but there was this, celluloid, this film that's kind of like a plasticky type of stuff, right? That you shoot pictures and shoot movies on back in the day. And if you were to extend this roll of film, if you had one long enough from the southernmost point of California all the way up to the northernmost point of Washington State, all along the West Coast, and that would represent the electromagnetic spectrum, meaning all the different types of frequencies of light, photons, then only one frame, which you can imagine that as being like if you took a razor blade and cut a line on that film, the thin line that razor blade would make would represent what we see in our visual spectrum, what we as humans can see, which we call Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, right? The colors of the rainbow, supposedly, right? That's what we can see. That little tiny perspective. And that's similar to, as an analogy you can take to use for basically what our perspective is in the grand scheme of eternity. Even if we were that roll of film, there are other rolls of film that start at different points in time, because time is our illusion that we make up to navigate to have the experiences that we're having here, but we're having them infinitely. They always have been happening. They're just isolated in this particular perspective. This is why you can know with quite certainty that you really can dictate the course of your own life, that we really do become what we think about. You just have to understand this clearly. And you don't have to understand it in some woo-woo, supernatural, paranormal, even metaphysical way. There really is no such thing as metaphysics. And I have a PhD in metaphysical sciences from the University of Metaphysical Sciences, which is basically a mystery school, somewhat like Hogwarts, like a modern-day cult of Pythagoras, in a way, where we learned all kinds of things outside of the mainstream school system. But even there's no such thing as, in the strict sense of what the meaning of the word metaphysics is, because the word physica we get, which means nature, and meta means beyond. So metaphysics is talking about what's going beyond nature. And that's where the field of physics comes from. They study nature, right? But physics and metaphysics are really studying the same thing, the fundamental nature of reality. The fundamental nature of reality. There is no beyond nature. There is only one nature. These are just words that we use. So in a way, I'm really a theoretical physicist as a metaphysical scientist. Except my domain is mostly in thought experiments. And then in the experiments I can do with the research that I do in the metaphysical field, which I consider to be science, philosophy, and spirituality. And then how I deal with sound and frequencies and using using language to create lyrics, to sing, to compose music, to perform instruments, to play instruments, and to record it and to publish it, and then to practice martial arts in the physical body and the fuel that goes into it, nutrition and all of those different things. Those are my experiments that I have to interact and interface with the world. But there's no difference between physics and metaphysics, really. There's no beyond nature. It doesn't make any sense. So we are all one, and this is really the omnifactors. When you think about them, that movie that Michelle Yeoh was in, it sums it up even better than my eternality axiom. The name of the movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Those are the omnifactors. Omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence. Everything, everywhere, all at once. And my eternality axiom, I wrote the paper on this, is all knowledge and all power is in all places at all times. All knowledge and all power is in all places and all times. Or you could say all knowledge and all power are in all places at all times, depending on how you want to phrase that. Both of them can be correct. And it's, interactive. The understanding is interactive when you consider what I call the omnifactor paradigm, starting with omnifactor prime, omnipresence. Right? Everything, everywhere, all at once. All knowledge and all power is in all places at all time. The fundamental nature of reality is eternality. So understanding that, I know I went really deep from listening to people talk about being afraid, but with a little bit of, you don't really have to think about it a lot. You just have to actually think, and you come to these conclusions. There is nothing to fear if you don't want to. I mean, if you want to have fear experiences, you can, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary, certainly, for you to be able to survive. Those neurobiological experiences, you can cut out flight and freeze, and you can focus on fight, which has everything. You can use it to evade, you can use it to duck and cover, you can use it to counterattack, you can use it to directly confront. Your endocrine system, your hormones, everything will kick into gear by being startled and stimulated, but you don't need fear. Fear is the emotional component that is tied up in all kinds of things, not the least of which is the confusion and the unknown of what's going to happen in the afterlife. That's really what all fear is tied up to. Embarrassment and shame and guilt and all this other stuff like that. They're really tied to this one thing. Atheists be damned when they claim that they don't believe in God. If they are afraid of things, it's because they're afraid of the unknown. And most unknowns are really tied to death and what happens in the afterlife. I stand by that very firmly. That's my position. And athanatophobology has been my practice for a long time. I've established it, and this is how I understand our existence. And yes, from my perspective, it seems ridiculous. But once again, with a little bit of contemplation, and you confront these things logically, you will understand that there is absolutely nothing to be afraid of unless you choose to be. I am Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander.